the Prime Minister has got to do something different with her hands, because all I'm thinking right now is that her fish was huge. Okay, let's keep going. Hi, I'm Colin Stone and this is Talk Shop, here to analyse the communication and presentation skills of the world's big names to highlight what works and what they need to change. This time it's the new British Prime Minister Liz Truss and her October 2022 speech at the Conservative Party conference. Let's get into it.
My friends, it's great to be with you here in Birmingham. It's fantastic to see the cranes across the skyline building new buildings, the busy trams coursing down the streets, and the bull standing proudly at the heart of Birmingham. My friends, this is what a city with a Tory mayor looks like. It's positive, it's enterprising, it's successful, and Andy Street is a human dynamo, delivering for the people of Birmingham.
So, first impressions. As with almost all conference speeches, the Prime Minister is using a teleprompter or auto cue, so she's essentially reading this word for word. That means, though, that as a speaker, you've got to work a lot harder to boost your energy or enthusiasm in what you're saying. And you do hear it at the end of those opening lines with the phrases, "This is what a city looks like," or "the human dynamo." She is adding emphasis there in an attempt to bring this to life, which I do appreciate, even if the delivery is still wooden in these early stages.
And our Teesside Mayor, Ben Houchin, is also delivering new jobs and investment. This is what modern conservatism looks like. Let's get Tory mayors elected in London, in Manchester, in West Yorkshire, and right across our great country.
Right, I need to stop it here because this is a well-worn point that we often bring up on our courses, and that is name-dropping different locations in a speech. The problem is, though, that if you fail to do it correctly, you risk alienating certain audiences because you omitted them from your list. So in this case, when the only places Miss Truss listed are in England, you can be certain the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish Tories feel left out. Now, I appreciate she's talking specifically here about mayors, but all it needs is a scripting tweak to include more than just English locations to really demonstrate to her audience, yes, I'm aware we represent the whole of the United Kingdom. Okay, let's get into the speech properly.
My friends, that is what conservatism is about. It's a belief in freedom, in fair play, and the great potential of the British people. So I'm not going to tell you what to do, or what to think, or how to live your life. I'm not interested in how many 2-for-1 offers you buy at the supermarket, or how you spend your spare time, or in virtue signalling. I'm
pausing it here for two reasons. Number one, for those of you familiar with our training, you'll be well aware of what we call pink elephants, unnecessary negatives, things you don't do or that you're not doing. The problem with coming out with pink elephants is that even though you say you're not doing something, the mind of an audience pictures it anyway. For example, don't think about a pink elephant right now. And your brain sees it anyway. So, with all that said, the Prime Minister's just come out with 3 pink elephants in a row right there. Let's watch it back so you can see the problem with this speech pattern.
So I'm not going to tell you what to do, or what to think, or how to live your life. I'm not interested in how many 2-for-1 offers you buy at the supermarket, or how you spend your spare time, or in virtue signalling.
And now an audience thinks, well, it does sound like you are telling me what to do, and it does sound like you're interested in how many 2-for-1 offers I buy at the supermarket. So what's the solution here? It's very simple. Only tell people what you are doing, what you have done, what you will do, rather than what you're not doing, what you're not interested in. The second reason I paused it here is what happens at the end of this line. Let's rewatch it again so you can see how this plays out.
How many 2-for-1 offers you buy at the supermarket, or how you spend your spare time, or in virtue signalling. I'm not
So what's happened there is she crescendoed too early in the line. She really went for the 2-for-1 offers at the supermarket, got some light applause which faded, and then the rest of the sentence ran out of steam, even though the part about virtue signalling should have been where she put the emphasis. And because it was then met with silence, we get an awkward few seconds where the PM is swallowing, which would have been covered by applause if she'd brought the sentence to an end at the right point and put the emphasis in the right place. Okay, let's move on.
I've juggled my career with raising 2 wonderful daughters. I know how it feels to have your potential dismissed by those who think they know better. I remember as a young girl being presented on a plane with a junior air hostess badge. Meanwhile, my brothers were given junior pilot badges.
Yeah, this is better. It's sharing a personal experience, a story from her life, to bridge on to a wider point. This is something we encourage everyone to do in a speech because it is effectively short storytelling. We can see the plane, we can see the badges, and it gives us as an audience insight into Miss Truss's thinking as well, even a snippet of her family life. I'd argue there is room for more detail, but when you've got plenty of political point scoring still to do, then things like where was the plane going or how old were they get left behind. On the tarmac, if you will.
They taught me the value of hard work and enterprise. And I stand here today as the first Prime Minister of our country to have gone to a comprehensive school.
It may surprise you, but there are very few outward signs to an audience that a presenter is nervous. The speaker themselves will be far more aware of issues like a shaky voice or trembling hands than the room because they're the ones experiencing it firsthand. There are only a couple of occasions where the audience notices the nerves. Number 1 is if the speaker volunteers their feelings at the start, or number 2, they do that. They drink their glass of water and use 2 hands, even though, as you saw, it looks very awkward. Now, the reason I believe she's done that is the voice inside her head which says, oh, be careful, you don't want to drop the water in front of all these people on this giant stage. Let's put 2 hands on it just to be sure. And the common sense thought of, when was the last time you ever dropped a glass while taking a drink, goes out the window. Later in the speech, she does gain the confidence to go for a one-handed drink, but yeah, this is telling, and the audience notices too.
Let's remember where we were when I entered Downing Street.
Hands.
Average energy bills were predicted to soar above £6,000 a year. We face the highest tax burden that our country...
Okay, let's talk about using your hands in a speech. For the last 20 seconds or so there, Miss Truss had her hands out wide and failed to vary their position much at all. It's what we call, my fish was this big. And it's fine to do, but only if it's part of a natural movement off your hands. If you're giving a speech like this, we recommend using speaker stance. Now that means having your hands together in a central position to start with in front of you. And as you talk and become more engaged, they'll move naturally and then they'll come back to that central position. The problem is we often get stuck in a hands pattern, like we've seen here, and again, it looks awkward. You've got to keep those hands moving, otherwise it risks distracting the audience. And the same is true, by the way, if your hands are in your pockets, if they are folded, or if you're playing with jewelry. Hand movements and body language need to underline the points you're making rather than undermine them. Let's move on.
I couldn't allow this to happen. I refused to consign our great country to decline. And that's why I promised on entering Downing Street to act. Let's get them removed.
Okay, I'm pausing it here to save us watching people applaud. Let's just go ahead to the Prime Minister's response before we analyse all of that.
Now, later on in my speech, my friends, I'm going to talk about the anti-growth coalition. But I think they arrived in the hall a bit too early. They were meant to come later on, so we'll get on to them. We'll get on to them in a few minutes.
So let's divide this into pre and post heckle. When the shouting starts, I believe the PM does the right thing. She finishes her sentence, asks to get them removed, and stay silent as the crowd's attention is on the Greenpeace protesters. Then there's the post heckle, and this is really interesting to me. Of course, this speech is scripted word for word, we've talked about that, but the ad-lib part about the anti-growth coalition is absolutely impromptu, and I'd argue it's the most natural part of the speech we've seen so far because she's making it up on the spot. Sure, there's some and the repetition of we'll get on to, but I'm okay with that. It's always better to sacrifice being word perfect for some actual energy and spontaneity. Okay, let's keep going.
It was the biggest part for a good reason, because we had to do it. But it's not the only challenge we face.
I'm stopping it here. Watch the eye contact.
For too long, our economy hasn't grown as strongly as it should have done. I know what it's like to live somewhere that isn't feeling the benefits of economic growth. I grew up in Paisley.
Eye contact while reading from an auto cue is difficult. There are two things to remember here though. Number one is that someone else is controlling the speed of the words on her screen. So if she wants to take more time over her words and then look around at the audience, she can. The auto cue will wait for her. At STV News, for example, we had a small hand-sized dial in the gallery, which you could turn more sharply depending on how quickly the anchor was reading. Although, for me reading the breakfast news in the morning, I controlled the auto cue with a foot pedal under the desk, like an accelerator. I find it highly unlikely that the Prime Minister is using a pedal. So that's point one. The gallery will work with your speed. And number two is about dividing the audience into sections for your eye contact. It's really easy. Far left, center, middle right, right. Now, rather than simply moving in a 180-degree rotation constantly, change it up. But the problem here is that the eye contact appears random, like she's attempting to use it, but is unsure how. And so we get a lot of darting back and forth. It's unfocused, and again, it's distracting. Instead, build the eye contact by looking at one of your sections for a couple of seconds and then move on to the next. And so on. And change it up. That's how you build eye contact.
The scale of this challenge is immense. War in Europe for the first time in a generation. A more uncertain world in the aftermath of COVID. And a global economic crisis. The
Prime Minister has got to do something different with her hands, because all I'm thinking right now is that her fish was huge. Okay, let's keep going.
Fundamentally, growth helps people fulfill their hopes and their dreams. And that's why our dynamic new Chancellor and I will be taking action in 3 areas. First of all, we will lower...
Our dynamic new Chancellor and I will be taking action in 3 areas. That's totally avoidable. It tells me that the PM perhaps only skim-read this part of the speech because otherwise she'd have known that it's the Chancellor and I, rather than breaking in the middle, which then left a gap for ripples of applause, which awkwardly grew into the start of her next paragraph, and Truss has to stop midway through it to allow it to settle. Frustrating to watch.
We're the only party with a clear plan to get Britain moving. We're the only party with the determination to deliver. Together, we can unleash the full potential of our great country. That is how we will build a new Britain for a new era.
Okay, that is the end of the speech. The PM stands there for another 30 seconds or so and then leaves. 2 final points to make. The first one is that the last line should always be the best, most naturally delivered of the entire speech, but Miss Truss is still reading the auto cue. If you're looking to fully engage your audience so that they believe your inspiring conclusion Work on memorizing that last line so you can leave the reading behind and know that the auto cue is still there if you forget it. And the second issue is there's been so much applause in this speech, as we often see at conferences, that I, as an audience member, am currently unaware that it's finished. That means the speaker has to make it obvious. And it's really easy to do. It just needs an emphatic "thank you" to bring it to a clear ending. I believe there may well have been one in the script, but by the time the audience was on their feet, perhaps the Prime Minister felt it was too awkward to interject and instead eventually just walked off the stage. This is the first time I've watched a full Liz Truss speech, and there's a lot to unpack. I appreciate she'll have felt the nerves here, but things like the static hands, the unfocused eye contact, and placing enthusiasm on the wrong parts of sentences are all fixable, and I suspect with more practice of doing these big speeches, these kinks can be ironed out. A lot of people will compare this rigid performance with her predecessor's style, but let's face it, if this were Boris, although there would have been more charisma, there would also be ad-libbed Muppets jokes and side notes about Greek mythology. So there's that. I trust you've enjoyed this edition of Talk Shop, and if you want to learn how to grow your confidence in public speaking, check out our e-learning courses on the Pink Elephant Academy and use the discount code TALKSHOP for 30% off everything. Till next time, smile and speak slowly.